Before we start, I'd like to remind you that this seminar has been organized by Politecnico di Milano and the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering and the Department of Architecture and Urban Studies, as well as by the Università, degli Studi di Firenze in the Department of Food, Environment and Forestry, as well as the Università degli Studi di Urbino, the Department of Biomolecular Sciences. And it is my big pleasure to leave the stage right now to Professor Maria Cristina Rulli, for the official greetings and for a brief introduction of what's going to happen today.
Thank you, Alessandro. And do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'm Maria Cristina Rulli. And I really hope you are in good health in this difficult period. At first, I have to beg your pardon because I don't use the video, but today my network doesn't work very well and I had to switch off the video so you can hear me at least. So I will be very brief in this introduction. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce this webinar, and I want to welcome you all. Welcome to our speakers of today and to the people attending this webinar. We are very happy because we had about 200 people registered for attending our event. This event was inspired by the results of our project named Bomagna Maputo that was granted by Politecnico di Milano through the Polysocial Award. It is an award rewarding Politecnico best research projects with social purposes. Polysocial and Politecnico di Milano is promoting responsible practice of sustainable and equitable development in local and international settings, reflecting an interdisciplinary culture of social innovation and cooperation for development. Polysocial are fundraising campaign of Politecnico di Milano, and in particular, Bomagna Maputo project is our project, and it is a multidisciplinary project having the goal to contribute to the development of the Maputo area through efficient landscape planning. Pay attention, so considering the water, food, energy perspective when using natural resources for food and energy production. Considering the interlink between water, energy, and food, so the so-called food web nexus is essential for human well-being, for poverty alleviation, and for achieving sustainable development goals. In the particular context of Africa, we have that by 2030, population will increase and it will reach more than 2 billion people, so implying a significant increase in water consumption that it is projected to be more than 200% of what we are consuming now. And also the energy demand, it is projected to increase by the 70% and the food by the 60%. And water is key to produce food and energy. And what we see in sub-Saharan Africa and in other regions of the world, we see that close to the increase of population we have high rate of water scarcity, and also the lack of electricity is still a reality for many. And in this context, the main aim of this webinar is to reinforce and improve the understanding of the role of water in the implementation of the water, energy, and food nexus. And so in this webinar, we'll present different interdisciplinary research experiences in order to create a dialogue to highlight criticalities, solutions, and synergies related to sustainable and fair water management in the context of water, energy, food, and also ecosystem nexus. So highlighting strengths, potentialities, and critical issues. We will debate on how to supply water to marginal farmers in resource-limited countries. We will debate on the impacts of capital-driven deforestation on land and water resources. Then we will talk on the role of large dam management on equitable and sustainable development. And then we will analyze the different types of water scarcity that are affecting countries in the developing world. And also we will talk about the strategies that can be used to deliver safe water and sanitation services to the large African cities. So in this framework, I will give the floor to Alessandro for introducing our speakers of today. Thank you very much for attending this webinar, and I hope you will enjoy this webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Rolli, for this very nice introduction. So I believe we are about to be ready to start. Just 2 or 3 recommendations before we proceed with the first presentation. I'd like to remind you all to keep your microphone muted in order to allow the presenter to, with the perfect environment, without any noise while he's making his presentation. At the same time, I encourage you to shut down your camera as well in order to have on screen only the person who is presenting in such a way to guarantee that all the focus is on the presenter himself. Please do not interrupt the person who is speaking with asking questions. I would like to remind you that there will be, after the presentation, a question and answer session of about 15 minutes. And I invite you all to compile little by little the Google documents that we are about to share in the chat with all of your questions, which one of us will then ask to the person which is in charge of presenting. Now, I believe we are over with me being the bad uncle and saying all the stuff you're not supposed to do. So it is my pleasure to introduce the first speakers of today, Giulio Castelli, Elena Bresci, and Federico Preti, who together in the Department of Agriculture, Food, Environment and Forestry in the University of Florence put together this very nice work on supporting marginal farmers with appropriate technology. They did this project in Zambezia. So I will leave the floor to you, and I try to be the good example, and I...
Okay, hello everyone. Thank you very much. I hope you hear me. I think before my presentation we should have the coordinators of the projects that are supporting this webinar speaking.
Yes, exactly.
So I'm happy to leave the floor First of all, to Laura Montedoro for Bomagna project, if she's in the room.
Sorry for interrupting you, Giulio, but Laura Montedoro wasn't able to participate, so she's sending her greetings, but she's having other commitments this morning. So we have Maria Cristina that has already a bit introduced the Bomagna project. So maybe we can go and leave the floor to the other guests. Giulia Donnici, she's connected.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm Giulia Donnici, and I work as cooperation desk for the Italian NGO Manitese, and I am responsible for Foreste and Quelimane agricola project at our HQ in Milan. I'm very enthusiastic today to be here this webinar, and I'm very happy with the collaboration with the university present here, and especially with the University of Florence, for example, with Giulio Castelli, who has introduced me, and Professor Federico Peti. We have a long history of international cooperation, not only in Mozambique, but also in other countries, such as Guatemala. I think it's very important to have this technical cooperation in our development project. And well, I will be very brief because I'm not an expert in water or wash, and so I'm very glad to participate in this webinar, not to talk, but to learn. So thank you very much for organizing that, and so I give the floor to other participants, and thank you very much again.
Thank you so much, Giulia. We have now Alberto Tanganelli, who's from COSB. So I leave the floor to Alberto. We cannot hear you.
Alberto, I think your microphone is maybe muted.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is hello, hi.
Hi.
Good morning. Hi.
Yes, now we can hear you perfectly.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Alberto Tanganelli. I'm work for NGO COSB in Mozambique as program coordinator. Our program in Mozambique aims to work in conciliation between two processes, social and economical development of our target groups, and conservation of biodiversity in the habitat where our target groups living. In the framework of this program, we are charged by Italian cooperation to implement a project called Agri-SMART to promote the resilient and inclusive development in 4 districts in Zambezia province. In this project, we try to implement a new approach called climate-smart agriculture to help to get action needed to transform and reorient support development and ensure food security in changing climate. Smart increasing agricultural productivities and incomes, adapting and building resilience to climate, reducing or removing greenhouse gas emission where possible. In this project, COSV have a partnership with the University of Urbino on ecosystemical services to give to decision maker in this target area to permit the achieve of this goal. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Alberto. And then I will leave the floor to Valentina Uccelli from ICEI. And Giovanna, but I don't know if she's connected. I think Valentina should be connected.
Hi everyone, okay. we are both connected. I will make a brief introduction and then I will leave the floor to Giovanna for a brief hello. Good morning everyone. I'm very happy and honored to be part of this webinar. I think it's a very interesting seminar. As Giulia said from Manitese, I am more a learner than a teacher in this issue. I am the desk officer of ICEI, Istituto Cooperazione Economica Internazionale. We are an Italian NGO, and we have been working in Mozambique for the last 9 years, I would say. But more intensively since 2016, we are developing several development projects in the province of Zambezia. And within this project, we are in partnership with many of the organizations and universities which are organizing this webinar. So we work with Manitese, with COS, with Università di Firenze and Università di Urbino in several development projects. Our main goal is within all our strategy in Zambezia is strengthening the resilience of environmentally vulnerable rural organization and territorial systems. Through several activities, through several actions, aim to implement and integrate production system that can reduce vulnerability to climate change in several districts in Zambezia, increasing and diversifying the productive activities, agricultural activities, and improve soil conservation and the preservation of main ecosystems, especially forests and mangroves, as a strategy to improve producers' resilience and their ability to adapt to climate change. So one of the big challenges of the biggest challenges we're facing is trying to help reducing the human pressure on natural resources, among them also water, of course, for their maintenance for the maintenance of their role in climate change mitigation and ecosystem service provision. So this event to share good practices and challenges about water management, I think it will be very useful in order to enhance our strategy in the country. So thank you very much, and we are very happy to be here today.
Thank you so much, Valentina. Do we have also Giovanna connected? Okay.
Yes, I'm here. Yes, I hope you're hearing me well, because connection here sometimes is not the best. Okay, so good morning, everyone. My name is Giovanna Fottia. I'm the coordinator of ICEI Mozambique program. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for the invitation to this webinar. And as was mentioned before, ISEI is part of 2 out of 3 projects that are concerned with this webinar. So we work with COSB, as Valentina said, with Manitese, with 2 of the 3 universities involved. So it's really nice to be here all together, which doesn't happen so very often. I will be very brief because Valentina said already a lot on behalf of ISEI. I just wanted to say that the issues that we are discussing are of utmost importance for the success of our projects, because they are in fact critical issues for the population of Mozambique in their everyday life. And we as NGOs, we would not be able to tackle these issues fully without the collaboration and the technical expertise of universities that are universities that are part of this webinar. So I think this is a great opportunity to learn more, of course, but I'm hoping that this is also a way to strengthen this collaboration among organizations. That it's an opportunity to enhance also our coordination. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Giovanna. I think that I can leave the floor to Alessandro for the introduction of our first presenters.
Yes, thank you very much, Alicia. So before, I was so enthusiastic and so looking forward about hearing Giulio's presentation, which has basically went straight ahead to his presentation without leaving the floor for the greetings. I apologize about that. And so I try not to be very repetitive, just few words. The next presenter is Giulio Castelli from the University of Florence, in particular the Department of Agriculture, Food, Environment and Forestry. And he is going to talk to us about their work on supporting marginal farmers with appropriate technologies and their project in Zambezi. Thank you very much, Giulio.
Okay, thank you. Let me share my presentation. So I hope it is working. Can you see it correctly?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. So as Alessandro introduced, my name is Giulio Castelli, and I'm a research fellow at the Department of Agriculture, Food, Environment and Forestry of University of Florence, Italy. And it is my pleasure to welcome everyone and to thank you for being here despite the difficult situation, and especially the presenters that managed to connect from other countries. So I'm going to give this talk about our Quelimane agricola project in Zambezia province, Mozambique. You know, this project is a multiple effort of different realities, NGO like Manitese and ISEI, but also local institutions like Comune di Milano, the municipality of the city of Milan, but also the union, the provincial union of farmers of Zambezia, and also University of Likungo, which is a local university. So it's really a very interesting effort. We have a lot of exchange in practices and theories. And with me on this project in the University of Florence, they work also Professor Elena Bresci and Professor Federico Preti, who are attending this seminar, and I am giving the presentation on their behalf. So this is a brief outline of the presentation. I will talk a little bit about the area of study, which is Zambezia province. Then I will describe briefly the project framework, and I will discuss the overall approach, and I will give some insights about our innovation and our early findings in this project. So first of all, we are in the center of Mozambique, actually in Zambezia province, which is partially drained by the Zambezi River. It has an area of around 100,000 square kilometers and is basically an agricultural province. We have a lot of products and mostly rice, but also maize, cassava, and soybeans, coconuts, and so on. If we see at the climate change, let's say, but at least at the meteorological and weather reports of the area, we can evidence how this province is probably one of the most hit by climate change, and among all others Mozambican provinces is probably the one that have the strongest decreasing trend in precipitation. So you see here it basically has a precipitation of around 1400 millimeters, but is slowing down. And on the other hand, even if the precipitation is decreasing, the population is growing and is growing fastly. So from the 18th, the population is almost doubled. Moreover, if we see climate change predictions, we can see that for the overall area, it is expected a further decrease in precipitation, but also an increase in temperature. And we should notice also that especially this area, especially the area in which we are working, that is around the Quelimane city, which is the capital city of the province, is not only hit by drought, but also by drought and floods. And this is quite relevant for our project. So here is the snapshot, the zoom of our project in the area. So Quelimane Agricola project was funded in 2018 by Italian Development Cooperation Agency. And the general aim of the project is to sustain an agricultural development of the province, and in particular of 3 districts, which are Machival, Namahurra, and Nicoadala. It is based on the 3 pillars: the improvement of agricultural production, the improvement of local value chains, but also the creation of rural markets. But basically, the water management implication of the projects are to provide sustainable water access for irrigation during the dry season in our districts. And this is, you will see, it's quite key for the production in the region. So once we approach the project, we did not start really by working directly with civil works, but we realized a context analysis. And what we did, and I'm quite proud of this, is that we started really learning by other experiences. So past research and development cooperation projects that develop solutions which we found to be useful in our approach. And then we try to select appropriate technologies for the area. So we start analyzing the physical context of our area. So basically, Zambezia is characterized by being a delta region. So if you see the maps, but also if you see the physical realities around our communities of interest, you will find that Zambezia has a very, very thick sandy layer of soil. And it is basically a very big, shallow, sandy aquifer that is recharged by the waters of Zambezi and other rivers that are in the area. So what do you have is basically a large area with a very thick sandy layer that has a lot of aquifer recharge. Of course, this is not a conventional aquifer. It is not very deep, but it's like a buffer of water that you have literally below your feet. This is not a common situation in other contexts. It is not happening in Europe, but in many African countries, it's really a resource. And what you find is that actually local people, they take a lot of advantage from this, even with the very traditional technologies. So they used to dig very shallow wells just after the rainy season, and thanks to this water, they are capable of growing crops even in the dry season. And you see here, even if you see FAO maps, this feature of the landscape in Zambezia region was very evident. You have to know that the typical cropping pattern of the region is to crop paddy rice in the wet season, and then in the dry season you go with other crops. So what happens is that this area where you want to do these seasonal wells, where the farmers, they dig the wells that we have seen just a few minutes before, in the wet season they are flooded. So you see that we have a kind of a natural recharge that is very powerful in this area. On the other hand, what we found analyzing the hydrology of the area is that, especially in Zambezia, rather than in other provinces of Mozambique, is quite seasonal. So we have a very strong rainfall season, but in the dry season, we do not have very much water. So we have to acknowledge this, and we have also to acknowledge that probably, if you see climate change reports, this amount of water that you have in the wet season is expected to decrease. So which was our idea, was to take advantage of the alluvial river aquifers in Zambezia. So these very, very thick sandy layers that are underutilized resource in Southern Africa. And I'm not giving further information about this because next presentation I think will be more, even more clear and more focused on this. And then the other idea was to maximize the benefit of the rainfall that we can have. As I mentioned, we started from other project approach. So what we see, since we are a university and we have quite a good network, we try to search in our community of scientists which university and which people have done similar approach, and we basically find out the A4Lab project of IHE Delft, but also two very interesting reports by Meta and Practica Foundation, which were developed around 2014 and 2015. So starting by this report, we find out that appropriate technology approach was suitable for the areas. So appropriate technology are a bunch of technologies which are based on proper theory. They are small scale, affordable, decentralized, labor intensive, energy efficient, environmentally sound, but more important, locally autonomous. And what we find out is that from the A4Lab project, we could replicate the sand dams approach. Then considering both the report that I mentioned and the A4Lab projects, we could even work with flood wells. But then, because in the University of Florence we have quite a good experience about this, we would like to work even with rooftop water harvesting. I'm now giving a quick overview of the technology. The first one is sand dam. Sand dam is a small dam built on or even into the riverbed of a seasonal sand river. So what happens here is that in the early beginning, when the dam starts working, you do not harvest, you do not collect water, but you collect sand. Then when you fill the upstream portion of your structure with sand, what happens is that you have a very, very thick but also porous layer of soil, which is sand, that can accumulate water by infiltration. So basically what you did is to recreate an artificial aquifer. And then from this artificial aquifer, you could even make a filtration gallery, or you can pump water. So this is very smart, especially when you have a lot of sand, but also a lot of evapotranspiration, because keeping the water underground, it lowers down the effect of evaporation. Then we start considering also flood wells, which are an innovative concept that could provide smallholder farmers with irrigation water, and these are especially good for floodplains. So you have seen before that in floodplains, in this alluvial aquifer, typically people, they dig traditional end wells, but these end dug wells, they used to collapse during the wet season. So the flood wells are a more engineered approach. You basically build a shallow tube well, which is around 8 to 9 meters deep, but that has also a cage that goes up after the ground level for 1.5 meters. In this way, you do not have damage by the flood, but at the same time, you have managed to build a well in an area that is characterized by a very high aquifer recharge. And then we went with typical rooftop water harvesting approach. So, you know, in the University of Florence, we have also a dedicated water harvesting lab, and Professor Elena Bresci is the coordinator. And we work with this technology. So this is basically our core business. So for establishing this project, we adopt an adaptive innovation piloting and project implementation style. So the basic idea is that these solutions are quite new for Mozambique. And the second important key point, we are in a marginal area. So Zambezia is not very served like Maputo area by industrial suppliers or even companies that can help you building proper infrastructure. So what did you have? You have a high percentage of possible damage, errors, or difficulties in implementation of innovative solution. So what we did, we acknowledged this problem since the beginning, and we set up this kind of scheme. In the year one, we had the first installation and test of our technology. In year two, we are doing a reassessment of our first installation of these technologies, and we are working out some technical improvements and also for operation and maintenance. And then in the third year, hopefully, this technology will be double-checked, and we could hand over these techniques, this infrastructure to local communities. So the keywords of our approach were appropriate technologies. So we want to work with appropriate technologies, but we want to use local materials. We want to test new infrastructure. We want to innovate, and we want to have a good operation and management. So when we went to the field, what we find out is that maybe we won't need sand dams. First of all, we didn't find really a very good area for building the sand dam that in any case needs an hard rock layer below it. But the point is that Zambezia has already enough sand. So we really do not need to build additional structures. So maybe if someone is expert of the area, he might know that the sand dams have been proposed in Mozambique, but in very upstream areas. As you have seen from the maps here, we are very close to the ocean. So we really are in a deposition zone of the rivers, and we have a lot of sand. Then we start working with rooftop water harvesting systems. You see here, this was the pilot installation. So we try to work really by ourselves without any any company, because basically you don't find engineering companies that work in the marginal areas. It's really not convenient for them. So what we do, we build this rooftop system by ourselves, and we try to equip them with a lot, or at least with some simple devices for secure good functioning. So what we end up building initial pilot on 20 systems for private families promoting private irrigation. These were built on site with local labor and materials, because even if we built with concrete, this concrete is probably one of the most suitable materials, because you can basically buy it very close to the local communities, even if it's not the best quality, of course. The tank size is 5 cubic meters, and we put the first rain exclusion device, but also a filter made with a mosquito net. We find out in this first year that rooftop water harvesting is really a new technique for Zambezia. And we worked in remote areas with probably not so good labor, so we are having some problems, especially with the concrete structures. So, you know, one thing is showing that the project is wonderful, that you are doing a lot of rooftop structure, but you really have to go into the everyday practice, the damaging, the reparation, and so on, if you want to do effective cooperation. So what we want to do is to change a little bit the design, because probably we can even work with more local material. But we have also to solve a water quality issue, because we have found that coliforms are present in our water. So this is not very new. So if you see some papers also published on Science and Nature, everyone knows that in this kind of rooftop water harvesting systems, you may have a problem of coliforms and of microbiological pollution. But then we want to work out also around this, maybe setting some specific instruction for the local population, for instance, to clean the tank, but also to clean the roof, for avoiding or minimizing this problem. Of course, this is irrigation water, but we may suppose that these people, maybe in very dry period, could also drink it. When coming to the flood wells, on the other end, so before starting, we make a preliminary analysis with 11 traditional wells and testing the conductivity. So even if in some cases was quite high, we haven't had the feeling that in these shallow wells that are again around 9 to 7 meters, there was not proof of very strong saline intrusion. So we were confident that maybe we could pump up to 9-7 meters without triggering saline intrusion in the sandy aquifer. That is one of the major threats to these agricultural systems. And then we found that the maximum water depth from the ground level was 3.5 meters. And this was in the dry season. So you can imagine, if the water is only at 3.5 meters in the dry season, how much water you can have in this aquifer. And then what we did, again, we built on site these wells with local labor and materials. So it was funny, we didn't really have time, or we have a lot of time, but we didn't really found a commercial provider to work with this solution. So basically we tried 2 or 3 companies, and everyone that was dealing with us says, okay, we came working if you work like UNICEF, NGO, or whatever, that they want us to drill 40 meters depth 40 meters depth wells. We are not dealing with this small-scale pilot approach. So what we ended up, we find out a very small local solution, and we start building the wells on ourselves with this technique that is quite engineered. I hope the video will work. In the end, we managed to build a fully operational flood well around 10 meters depth in around 2 days of work, from the cradle to the grave. So that means from setting up the drill up to the casing of the well, we need no more than 2 days. It's also quite quick, probably quicker than bringing there a truck with a driller that can go up to 40 meters. And what we are doing in this initial stage of the project, we are not supplying the farmers with motor pumps, but for the moment we are using manual pumps. And we built 3 pilot flood wells in the first year. So these are a little bit of the analysis we made. So you see that even during the dry season, at least in 2 out of 3 flood wells, we have considerable water. We managed to pump water at least with a small hand pump from that without any kind of project. So this is a very also efficient solution in terms of costs. But again, this is only a piloting, and this is only the first year. So despite building 3 wells that, again, they are used for irrigation, but in this case not for private irrigation, but for project communal fields, we find out that this is a kind of promising solution. It has a low cost and can be made with locally available materials. We haven't found really saline water up to 9 meters, and this confirms us that we are not really having a major environmental impact, or we haven't having an impact on the local agroecosystems. The water availability is medium because we have a little bit of drawdown in the dynamic water level when we are pumping. But so far, it's also good that we can operate this system without any motor pump needed. So this keeps our solution sustainable for the moment. And we get relatively clean water without any kind of salt or even turbidity. But we need to work more even here. So we have to make new pilots, and it will be interesting to try to go to deeper depth to see how much water we can get, and which is the limit for saline intrusion, of course, with maximum attention here. And then we want to do proper pumping tests, and we have to plan a long-term monitoring of these infrastructures. But what it came out from our project is that the key for our approach was really to learning from other experiences, and I would say from other research experiences, not only from other cooperation projects. And as you have seen, we adopt this 3-step adaptive innovation methodology, and we are in the phase of the initial piloting. This year, we hope to refine a little bit more our technology and also to build some research over this. And yeah, for rooftop water harvesting, we want to focus especially on a long-term methodology that allow us to monitor the water quality, the impact of crops, and the efficiency analysis. We need also to train local communities. And also for the flood wells, we want to develop some kind of analysis in this way, and we may test also solar pumps. Of course, this will need a lot of time, and it is very good in this framework that our project includes one Mozambican university, which is Università del Congo. So we are in the phase of establishing an international agreement between our university and the Congo University. But which is most important is that with this agreement, we will be allowed to follow their master students, but we could even have extra European mobility of our students there. So we will have the chance to really take care of this innovation under a scientific point of view, and this is basically my hope for the future, alongside with the development of the Zambezia province. Thank you. I finished the presentation, and I want to thank you really the larger project team with Federico, Elena, but also Maria Vittoria, Giulia, Sergio, Ernesto, who will talk later on, and engineer Oliveira Silva, Francisco Scimote, and Matteo Anaclerio. Thank you very much. So I don't know if there was some question on the chat.
Thank you, Giulio. Yes, I think Lorenzo should be collecting questions. Lorenzo,
yes,
are you connected?
Yes, I'm here. Yes, I shared the file on the chat where I collected the question. Unfortunately, there's just one question for now, but I invite everyone to write them in the chat, and I will copy paste into the shared document.
Okay, well, I have one question from Anneliese. Could you explain why you choose to work with manual pumps? Okay, thank you for the question. This is very interesting. So basically, this was, I mean, let me articulate a little bit about this. So actually, the question is I think is very appropriate. And it follows a story in a sense, because actually we choose to work with manual pumps because in the early beginning of the project we started to actually look around and check which was the situation before the project, and what we found out is that a lot of farmers, and here we are talking about community farming, they really were, let's say, supplied with motor pumps, but the system was failed due to maintenance. So actually, in these marginal areas, especially when we go far from the capital city, even if people they don't have maybe they have a motor pump, but the local communities they do not have the structure to have a proper funding and management plan. So what we ended up is that we find out that a lot of communities, I would not say a lot, but 2 or 3, they already have motor pumps, but they really cannot operate them. So what we are clearly not thinking to work only with hand pumps, but the idea is let's start with hand pumps, and then we will see which community is most capable of self-organizing them, and then there we'll go with maybe fuel pumps. And there is another interesting thing to notice is that in parallel to our project, the local government is pursuing, is realizing a campaign to support small-scale farmers with solar pumps. So what we did is we try our best to get in this program to tell the government, please, we will pay for these pumps the full price. We do not want the subsidized price, but please let us test these solar pumps. But in the end, we did not really can get to this point, but we are monitoring the situation. So the idea is that we started with hand pumps to not complicate everything since the beginning, but then we are planning to scale up. And one possible scaling up is to have maybe regular pumps to the communities that are responding better. But the other thing is that we may really try to go for the solar pumps if the institutional relationship that we have with the local authorities will be strengthened in the next future. Then shall I see the Google Doc?
Yes, I think it's better if you open that that document. I reported there all the questions.
Okay, so can I ask about the pH of the water? The pH of the water was perfectly in the standard range. Can you please explain how many farmers use one pump and how much area is irrigated? I understand that you have a community irrigation project. Okay, let me explain a little bit about the project. The project is based on actually 6 small community fields where we are trying to implement new and improved cultivations, and each one will be irrigated. But in the everyday practice of the average farmer of Zambezia, the irrigated areas is not very much, to my best of understanding, and talking about small farmers. What they do is basically to build some, like I say, the traditional wells, but even in that case, they are not using a pump. They are using maybe buckets to draw water from these wells. So actually, it's not very much. The irrigation is still, let's say, at a development level in the region. It's not like other countries where you have large irrigation systems, according to my feeling. Of course, yes, we put casing in the flood wells. You should think about flood wells like normal wells, but with less depth. Can you share which is the total cost of the construction of the flood wells, all included? Let me, I don't know if I have this information, but maybe if Maria Vittoria is connected, I think she can give this information. I really don't remember in this moment. She should have, Maria Vittoria, how much we...
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay. Yeah, so thanks for the word. Yeah, the price for the cost for the flood well systems is about 2,400 euros. And while including the manual pump. While for the water harvesting, roof water harvesting system is about 250 euro.
Okay, stop. Let me go back to the questions.
I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I believe we can leave a little bit more room for the discussion this afternoon, in such a way that every presenter this morning can have the chance to show us their work. In particular, it is my pleasure to present a person coming from a very beautiful city, which is Delft, from the Netherlands. She is a lecturer and a researcher in irrigation development, and therefore I leave the room to, I apologize for my pronunciation, Annelieke Dakker, and her work on individualization of smallholder irrigation from sand river aquifers in arid African lands.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you very much. I'm now going to share my presentation. So just 1 second, please. Okay, let me do it like this. Can you see it?
No, Annalika, maybe try again.
Yep, I'm trying again. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Yes, perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. So indeed, my name is Annelieke Dukker, and I work as a lecturer researcher with IHE Delft Institute, where we do research and provide master education to international students on basically any water-related topic. And well, thank you very much for asking me and providing me the opportunity to present some of the work that we've been doing in the past couple of years. So I'm gonna focus now on basically sand river aquifers in this session. So what are they, and why do we think that they're so fascinating and worthwhile to look into? I'm going to share a bit on the ongoing research projects that we've been working on, and some of the results, and whereby I will focus on the private smallholder irrigators, and I'll also explain why we focus on this particular group of farmers. So I think there's quite some connections with the previous presenter. So I think it's an interesting connection. Well, I think for those of us who've been traveling to Africa frequently or regularly, I think you've seen, well, at least if you're flying in daytime, you've probably seen these kind of landscapes, these fascinating landscapes from high in the air, where you see these sandy rivers in very arid landscapes. At the same time, seeing these green lines, green riparian vegetation on the side, indicating that there's actually a lot of water somewhere hidden in these systems. Also, you see the dark lines or the dark patches, which are still some leftovers of surface water. Well, if you then go down and you are standing next to these sand river aquifers, this is basically what they look like. So they're huge deposits of sand. As you can also see, this picture is taken in the Tuli River, actually in Zimbabwe. So we work in Zimbabwe and Mozambique and Kenya and Ethiopia. But this picture is the Tuli River, which is a tributary to in the end, to the Limpopo that's going to Mozambique. And well, this picture was taken in quite far into the dry season, but you can see that still the riparian vegetation is very green and fresh. So indicating indeed that there's a lot of water still available in these rivers. So how do they work? Well, this is a very basic picture of a cross section, whereby you see that there's basically hard bedrock underneath. I don't think I have a pointer now. I don't know if you can see this, but anyway, the bottom part is usually hard bedrock, and then there's a large deposit of sand. So in the wet season, you will see that, as you can see on the pictures, there's usually surface water flow, not during the whole wet season, but after major storms, mostly. So it looks basically like a more or less ordinary river. And well, as you can see on the picture, so the water levels are above the sand levels. Then in the dry season, however, it becomes very interesting, because you see in the pictures that you see just a large plain, a large river of sand. However, there's still a lot of water stored in these riverbeds because of these hard bedrock base basically. So this is what these look like in the dry season. So just a few basic characteristics of what we've found so far is that the dimensions, they're from less than 100 meters up to more than a kilometer wide. So we're talking about quite large rivers. Some are just a few meters deep, and we've seen also up to 9 or 10 meters deep. I've also heard from people in the area that some they're even much deeper, but that has not been confirmed to my knowledge with technical tests. But at least this at 9 to 10 meters is let's say proven. Well, water remains available throughout the dry season, even in the last couple of really dry years, so with very bad rainy seasons that we've seen in Southern Africa. Of course, this depends on the intensity of the use and the dimensions of the river, but at the current use, we see that there's plenty of water remains available throughout the dry season. From my own experience, I've not seen any water levels even far into the dry season that go beyond, let's say, half or 1 meter below the surface. So if you just simply dig, usually at 30-40 centimeters or a bit deeper, you will find water. Preparing green vegetation year round, it's as you can also see on this Google Earth picture, the image, you see the rest of the surroundings are completely dry, whereas the trees along these rivers, close to the rivers, are still very green. We've done some basic tests with water quality, and we found that they're generally very good water quality. And of course, what is quite amazing about this resource that you are secure of an annual refill. So every wet season with major storm events, these rivers fill up, these storage systems. So, well, we see in this picture, you see the map of Africa, basically in all these more brighter yellow and orange parts, which are the arid and semi-arid regions. These rivers can be found in most of these areas. And so, for example, for the southern part of Zimbabwe, which is really a basic rough calculation, where we see that there's already 1,000 kilometers of sand rivers alone in this section that are at least 150 meters wide. And at the same time, we see that there are enormous food security problems, and also a lot of problems with other irrigation development in these countries. So, well, combining the two, I think it's very much interesting and also very relevant to dive into these rivers further and see how we can better make use of it in a sustainable way, and also for the development of rural livelihoods and the enhancement of rural livelihoods. So what we do, we have several research projects that we've started up together with a large group of colleagues. We started with this in 2016 with the A4 Labs project that was already mentioned by Giulio. Later on we have set up more projects in the region, and so several in Mozambique and Zimbabwe, and we also work in Ethiopia and Kenya. So in Mozambique, we work near Chokwe in Gaza province, in the south of the country. And in Zimbabwe, we work in the Mzingwane catchment, which is also part of the larger Limpopo basin. Main things what we do is we have done some hydrological assessments and analysis, so measurements in the field, and especially with many students of IG and other institutes, partners that we work with, some modeling exercises. We've done field surveys also to understand what the current use is, especially with private irrigators, smallholder irrigators. So what do these families develop, and what kind of challenges do they face, and to also learn from that to feed into our action research programs, which is the third major items. So we've set up so-called living labs, so with farmers in the region where we're testing mostly solar irrigation and different types of abstraction systems. So as you can see in this picture, there are ways to abstract both the water from the riverbed directly, but also depending on the local characteristics, it's sometimes also possible to abstract water directly in their fields, of course, with certain advantages over abstracting from the riverbed. So I'm going to share some results now of the field surveys that we've done with current farmers, which is mainly in Zimbabwe, but I think that the situation of it's somehow comparable. Of course, the context is very much different in terms of economic and politics, but yeah, the certain practices are quite comparable. And my colleague Barry van den Pol, who's the next presenter, will also share more of the technical details of what we've been testing with the farmers in our action research program, and then focusing specifically on Mozambique. All right. So as I said, this service took place in southern Zimbabwe, as you can see in the blue circle on the map. So in the Tuli and Shasha rivers. The climate, it's arid, just approximately 350 millimeters of rainfall annually. And the major issue there, it's already not a large amount, but the major issue is also that the variability is extremely high. And there are very frequent dry spells in the rainy season. So this makes agriculture, even in the rainy season, very difficult, very challenging, with major crop losses as a result. So as you also can see on the map, which is from a few months back, the current situation is very worrying in terms of food security. So the levels of food security are high, which is partly caused, of course, by these bad years in terms of rainfall, but also economic crisis that hit the country in the past decades actually, and it has been worsened actually in the past 2 years. The region is basically, well, the sand rivers that we look at they're bordering South Africa and Botswana. Which gives some advantages, which I'll get back to. So yeah, why do we focus on private smallholder irrigation? So first of all, I think some of what has been written in a lot of literature about irrigation schemes, communal irrigation scheme, is that we see that they face a lot of issues regarding the sustainability and especially in maintenance, operation and maintenance on a long term, which is linked to the fact that they are often dependent on external agencies, so government or NGOs, to get these systems going. So that's why we are trying to see, okay, what are maybe other ways or alternatives to these kind of practices. And in recent years, there has been more attention to private irrigation. So basically that means irrigation by individual families who started themselves. So it's farmer-led irrigation, initiated by farmers themselves, usually with less or no support of external agencies. And in that sense, it's thought to be better adapted to local circumstances and shocks, to be able to deal with those better. This is usually informal, so it's under the radar, so you hardly see this in informal statistics. That's also that it's sometimes a bit more challenging to do research about this, but I think that's just making it even more interesting. So what we see is the current use of these rivers is, of course, for livestock, for domestic purposes. There are several community gardens where also some of our partners work with in these community gardens. Communal irrigation schemes, as I already mentioned, the private smallholder farmers, and there further down in the Limpopo, there are commercial farms. As you can see, this is mainly citrus production, and these are like 600 hectares, for example, so really large farms. The lady in the upper right corner is Doña Anita. She's one of the farmers that we work with in Mozambique, and she's I think this is her one of her first harvests that she managed to get with in our project. So it's a very nice, memorable moment that was. So despite these different types of uses, it's still very little. So we see that the area is largely, or the water resource is largely underutilized as of yet. So there's a lot of potential to increase. So what do farmers do now? So these are some of the practices for abstracting the water. So on the left picture, you can see a larger well point system used with submersible pumps, so larger pumps that are used by the irrigation schemes. The middle picture is basically very simple low-cost technique that farmers have developed themselves to abstract water with PVC pipes, such a well point system. And on the right, you see the scoop holes, which are also commonly found in the area. So what they do, they dig these holes, put their pump in, and sometimes if the dry season advances, they put their they change, so they dig another scoop hole a bit further in the river if this one dries up. And then, which I haven't included a picture of it, but then they some also have, but very few actually, for what I've seen, have a shallow well in their field, so on the river bank. Well, so what you can see also is that there are basically no sand dams in these systems. So that's also what Julia was already mentioning. The dimension of these rivers is they're really big. So at this moment, there's actually totally no need to work with sand dams. So what, as far as I know, they've been constructed in smaller systems where indeed to enhance the storage capacity, but in these rivers there's totally no need to do that with the current use. So they use different pumps. The majority of farmers, smallholder private irrigators, they use diesel and petrol pumps, mostly petrol pumps. On the upper right corner, you see a picture of a submersible pump that's being used by the irrigation schemes. So the schemes are about, should I say correctly now, like 30 hectares, 40, 60 hectares, about approximately. And the other picture, you see a solar panel, but it's yeah, there are very few farmers who work with solar, at least in the sand rivers. So a few things that we found with these private irrigators. Well, they're all farming families, so the labor is really coming from most of the family members. Usually the men are the ones who are basically full-time working, and the wife and children help out yeah, part-time or during the weekends. They grow a combination of staple cash and fodder crops, vegetables, and it's mostly for subsistence and limited local sales. So marketing is really an issue there. The area is quite remote, so the distance to urban markets is far.
2 minutes.
Oh gosh. Okay, then I'm gonna hurry up. Well, we saw the low-tech abstraction techniques, fuel pumps, and the average irrigated area is about 0.2 hectares. It's the major source of income, but very importantly, most of the families also have additional income sources of farm income to be able to sustain actually these farms. So what drives this more individual form of irrigation? It's basically droughts and dry spells, because some of the farmers actually come from further inland where they experienced problems with deeper groundwater wells. So they came to the river because there's a lot of water available. Some of the farms, they come from irrigation schemes where they were fed up with how things were well, basically not moving, so they decided to start for their own. And of course, the economic crisis. What facilitates this process is the abundance of water in the sand aquifers and the availability, of course, of pumps due to the proximity also to South Africa. The challenges, economic volatility is the major issue. So availability and fuel access is really a big problem. Access to market, and some of the families don't have a lot of farm income, so to balance their cash flows is really a challenge. Some challenges on farm level as well, but they seem to be pretty well in coping with these. Water scarcity is not an issue, which is very remarkable, I think, in irrigation developments in Africa and even globally, I think. And of course, initial investment costs are you need to be able to buy a pump, so that's an issue. So I've seen that quite a few families actually stop irrigating because of these issues, which is of course a pity. So coping strategies, well, they're all, what we've learned is they all start very adaptive, very gradual. So step by step, trying to grow the farm to avoid losses, of course. At field level, they take certain measures. They grow perennial crops to keep certain cash flow coming in. Early planting to avoid peak irrigation requirements. And as I said, the local networks play a huge role, especially there's a very lively trade in fuel from across the border, increasing barter trade over the past years. And as I said, solar powered irrigation is very difficult because of the higher investment costs. So some lessons on this, that we see that the resilience of private irrigation along sand rivers is enhanced through that they reduce their vulnerability by measure that they take themselves. They increase their adaptability, basically getting new skills, getting new knowledge. They invest in their networks. And the advantages intrinsic to the system. So the location to other countries, and especially the sand river, which is filling up yearly. So we think this form of private irrigation is a very relevant livelihood strategy, but it's also a very challenging one. It's not a paved way to success. Well, so we still have lots and lots of questions as well. We've been working on this project for a few years now, but I think we've only starting to appreciate all the complex relations and very interesting questions that are on these sand rivers and the farmers using them. So what is the actual potential? If you look at it from a basin scale, both from a physical and a socioeconomic perspective, what are the physical limits to the systems? So what can you sustainably abstract, to which extent? How to sustainably manage this resource? At the moment, it's hardly managed. It's all informal use. It's not being paid for or monitored. So how could you do that to avoid over abstraction as well, and to have an equitable sharing of your water resources? For whom is this type of irrigation accessible, and especially also looking into solar pumping. So what are the limits to this? Financial, cloudy days, what is the possible cropped area, and how do you link that to the labor availability of families, the types of crops, marketing, and the technology that is at hand? How to overcome marketing challenges, and well, many more of these issues that we're looking into. So if you want to know more about what we've been doing, this is 2 links, one to our project website and one to a paper that we recently published with the whole project team. So you can also see the names of many of the people involved in our project. showing some of the results also that Barry will talk about after this session. Yeah, so that's what I wanted to share with you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Becker. I believe we have time for only one question, unfortunately. Time runs fast.
Okay. Let me see. Question?
Yes, I shared again the link to the shared document.
Okay, I see two questions. Are there large farmers in this area using sand water? Well, so in the Mozambique area, yes, there are few commercial farmers, and there's a larger irrigation scheme, communal scheme. In the Zimbabwean area, they're in the specific rivers, so the Shashane, the Tuli, and the Shashe where we work, there are only very small individual farmers, some community farmer schemes, and community gardens. So there are hardly any large-scale commercial farmers. Let me see. The other question is, if water resources will be more exploited, would it have some consequences to the fragile? Yes, of course, that's something that we really need to look into. So up to what point, where is the threshold, basically, where you start competing with the riparian vegetation or downstream users or yeah, environmental issues. So that's something that indeed we have no answer on yet, but what I can say now is that it's really, there's still so much water in these rivers that at the current use and with intensifying with like the number of farmers we're working with now, that there's really no issue in water availability. But of course, if the use will intensify in the future, that's really something that we're trying to look into. So what is a sustainable way of abstracting and how do you manage and monitor that? Yeah. Thank you. Those are the two questions I see in the Google Doc. I don't know if there's any other questions.
Yes, I forgot to copy one. So there's one more. If we have time, I don't know, Alessandro.
Okay, 1 minute and a half.
Which question is this? Is it the one on water saving irrigation methods?
Yes.
Yeah. So yes, well, basically what we've in Mozambique, which Barry will also explain, we've been trying different types of irrigation methods, but basically what the major issue is, of course, is how it fits into both the operation and maintenance, the labor availability. So that's where how we are. So water saving, yes, it's relevant, but there are so many other factors that determine whether the irrigation equipment, of course, is suitable or has potential to be sustainable. So the water saving is just one component of that, and I think the labor, the types of the crop choice, and these interactions is something that we try to monitor and learn from.